Hi, listeners, and welcome to my Holland Update. I'm Marianne Manderfield, Public Information Coordinator for the city, and today our guest is Brian White, Director of Streets and Transportation. Hey, Brian, welcome.
Hey, hi, Marianne. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm glad you're with us. I think this is your first time here, right?
It is. First podcast.
All right, good. Well, thank you. So today we are going to talk about a couple things, the city's fall cleanup and then your department gearing up for winter. We've got a lot of leaves on the trees still, and we're right kind of in the middle of the fall cleanup, at least for residents, correct?
That's correct.
So they've got until the 17th?
Yes. So residents in Holland have till November 17 to put out the leaves curbside.
Okay. And then what happens from there?
Yeah. So as residents are putting out the leaves, we will, if we start seeing big piles, we'll run crews out and start picking those up. But basically, once the deadline hits, November 17, then we go through town and make a final pickup at that point.
Okay. And then you guys have got a specific route of how you go. So some residents may not see that pile picked up for, a week? Maybe?
Correct. It could be several. So
okay.
From the time November 17th hits and we stop folks putting out, it sometimes can take us 5 to 6 weeks in total to pick up the whole town.
Okay.
That varies depending on weather and, how things are going on a given year. But typically that's been our experience.
So don't fret if your leaf pile is still there in 2 weeks.
Yes.
After the 17th.
Yes.
It will get picked up.
It will. And we will coordinate with folks. Again, the leaves are hanging on for this season in particular. We will communicate if we do add a week.
Okay.
We're not prepared to make that announcement or decision yet.
Okay.
But as November 17th approaches, if we decide that the leaves are hanging on still and there's we'll look at forecasts and things like that for snow. But if there's an opportunity to do that, then we may extend it. If we do that, we'll go ahead and put that in the newspaper, put that on our website and things like that, so folks can look for that.
Okay.
If there is a question down there.
And we'll get that out on our social media channels as well. So just kind of stay tuned and watch for that.
Yes.
And then what do you do with all those leaves?
Yeah, so there's really 3 places where we go with the leaves that are collected. There's 2 local companies in Holland that run a composting or a recycle operation. That's Brewers up on Chicago Drive. And I want to say Chef, but it's actually Republic now to the south of town. What we typically do is we try and set up our routes and our disposal in close proximity to those points where we're dumping. So we want to limit the amount of truck time that is needed to get to those spots. Mm-hmm. So typically, like the Heights will go over to Brewers on Chicago Drive. The west end of town, South Shore, and that sort of thing will go over to Chef. And then we have actually started our own leaf compost area that's out by our transportation office on 48th Street near Industrial, where we take, again, we're building that up, so we want to eventually take a third to a half of all the leaves we collect and put it in there. And then what we do is we compost that, and then the idea being that we'll use that soil that we create on our construction projects as we put things back together once we're done.
So it's all repurposed.
Yes.
In a sense. Great.
Yeah.
That is it a pretty unique program that the city offers, or is it more typical that?
Yeah, so I do know of a few places that do a similar program. The city of Zeeland, I believe, does something similar. I know East Lansing and Grand Rapids also. I think Grand Rapids may go with the bag method.
Okay.
But there are different programs out there that communities do, so we're not unique in that sense.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So once the leaves are picked up, then you guys get the plow trucks out.
We do, yes. And so we're hoping for a light winter, but who can never really know there.
Right.
So, yeah, there's a fair amount of work goes into the transition over from our leaf pickup to our winter snow and ice fighting mode. and a lot of that happens in our vehicle maintenance. So our mechanics are switching around trucks. A lot of our trucks are dual-purpose trucks where we'll have slide-in units that can handle the salt and the spreaders and things like that. That we use those for normal dump trucks in the summertime. So we're converting those over. We're putting plows on and basically just getting ready for winter.
So you don't have two separate fleets of vehicles then?
We do not. No. Now we do typically, because we're in Michigan, and particularly in those shoulder seasons, we could get a snow and ice event, freak one at any time, basically. And so we do typically keep 3 or 4 salt trucks ready to roll at any time. But by and large, our full fleet is many of those are dual purpose trucks.
Okay. Cost savings, I mean.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Great. So who monitors the weather? Take us through like 24 hours, say, once we really get into the weather of the winter season, the snow and the ice. Take us through a 24-hour day.
So our street superintendent, Scott Boovey, is pretty well plugged into the weather. He is coordinating his efforts with the Holland Police Department and the shift supervisors that are on staff, basically 24/7. And we're constantly communicating back and forth about conditions, forecasts, things like that, and reacting to whatever comes to us. So, for instance, an ice event, we'll treat that a little bit differently than, say, a blizzard or, some snow event where we expect to accumulate a fair amount of snow on the ground. So it is different, and we deploy, according to what's happening real time with the weather. So, but it is a constant thing. I know Scott, he has a lot of late nights in the wintertime where he's doing it. And we have set up the chain of command, at least at the transportation department, with some folks that'll take over as Scott, has time off or something like that. Then there'll be other folks that step into that role. Okay. And we'll do that communication with HPD and, keep eyes on the weather forecast and things like that.
Because I'm guessing his days start very early.
Yeah, right. So and again, every snow event is different depending on when it starts and when it stops and, how heavy the snow and all that different stuff. But it really depends, on those kind of factors. But he can be out as early as midnight checking on things. Okay. Or, as late as 3, 4, 5 o'clock. Again, just depending on when that storm's coming in and how we do that. So kind of expanding upon that, then what we typically do, our normal MO then once we're into that sort of event is we want to clear the majors first. So all the major streets will see the plow trucks first. That usually we strive to try and get that done before the morning rush. And then we'll roll into the local streets. And again, depending on if it's still snowing or what's going on, we may circle back to the major streets again before they're done with their shift. One thing that our goal, our policy is we try and get to every street within 24 hours of a snow event. Okay. So that's kind of our goal, our policy. And I, just talking with Scott, our street superintendent, the other day about this, and boy, maybe in the last several decades, you could count on one hand how many times we weren't able to do that, and those are pretty unique storm events. So
that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, we're trying to get to everybody's street, and again, public streets, within 24 hours of the snow event. So we run, when we've got it, all hands on deck, we'll run 7 plow routes, and a lot of those plow routes are 2 drivers, 2 trucks to a route. Okay. However, we do have some of the bigger trucks that have the wings on them. We'll run that route with just the single bigger plow truck with the wing on it. Okay. Now that wing setup is not necessarily great in the tight city streets. Right. So really we're limited where we can do that. That's the Waverly, Washington Avenue sort of thing. So So we're still, when we talk city streets and the tight radiuses and things like that, we're still running 2 trucks a lot of the times.
So last year, for instance, when we had the polar vortex, I think it was, and pretty much everything shut down for a whole week, you guys are still running.
Yeah, we're running. So it's interesting. So, and I think most folks plugged into this sort of thing and who've lived in Michigan know, okay, salt, that tends to not really work real great below 15 to 10 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
So once we get below that, we're running more sand and just trying to get the snow off the road at that point. So, yeah, it varies from event to event.
Sure. That can make for a long winter, though, huh?
Yes, yes.
And then once you start plowing the snow and you talk about snow removal, where does that go?
Yeah, so typically, and again, if you're a Michigander, you know that a lot of that stuff ends up in your driveway, right? And you just have to deal with it, and it's part of living in Michigan. But in those areas downtown, for instance, or on cul-de-sac ends, when we're not plowing and when there's a lull in a storm system or something like that, then we'll go ahead and we'll haul that snow to a couple of areas in town where we can pile up the snow. Windmill Island is one place where we go with some of it. There's a few other vacant areas that we're piling up snow.
So I got to ask this question because I hear, and I do it myself. I just plowed the driveway, and the plow came by and put a bank right back in front of it. Is there any way to get around that? Do you go wider on your driveway?
Yeah, no.
And there really isn't, is there?
There really isn't. I will say that Holland is a little bit unique in that the way we plow those cul-de-sac ends, we plow them to the center, which, I know some road agencies will plow to the outside, and so that's a little bit of respite for those folks that are on the cul-de-sac ends where they don't have to deal with quite so much. But it really is just a fact of living in Michigan. I will say that our plow routes and our plow trucks are pretty regular. So once you see the plow go by, that's probably an opportunity right before it gets really cold, particularly like overnight and turns into the proverbial ice nugget. Right. It's like, hey, just get it. Hopefully you've got a good snow blower or a really good shovel and take care of it.
Take care of it at that point.
Yeah.
So is there a special type of salt for the road, or is it just regular salt?
Yeah, no, we actually go through the state of Michigan, handles a statewide contract for salt purchasing.
Okay.
And it does it. There's some salt mines over in Detroit that basically supplies, I think, the vast majority for Michigan. So we participate in that state contract, and every year they go ahead and bid it out. There's really, I think, just two salt companies that service our area. And that's where we pick up our salt. The other thing that we've been doing more recently is there's a de-icing liquid. And so we've outfitted all of our trucks with small tanks on them. And we're actually, in addition to the salt and sand mix that we'll spread, we also add a little bit of that de-icing liquid to that mix.
Okay.
And we found that really does good. One, I think it limits the amount we need to spread because it works a little better, and two, it tends to lower that temperature too. So where salt has a little bit of trouble starting at maybe 15 degrees, if we have it's called Boost, the chemical, then we're able to drop that down to about 10 degrees.
Okay.
So, and that de-icing liquid is, I should just note for those that may be interested, it's just a local product that's pumped. It's like a brine, basically.
Okay.
But that's something that we'll add right at the spinner on the back of the truck.
Okay.
And again, we found that it helps a little bit with not only the volume we have to spread, but also the temperatures where it works at.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. One more thing I wanted to ask about is mailboxes. So what do you encourage residents to do to protect their mailbox or...
Yeah, sure. So mailboxes, again, this is part of living in Michigan. On the one hand, you have to be careful because mailboxes certainly are intended to be breakaway because we don't want the proverbial iron mailbox that somebody, a wayward motorist, could impact.
Right.
They need to be breakaway and things like that for roadside safety. But at the same time, we certainly want them to hold up. to things like force of snow, because that's one thing that we don't typically replace a mailbox for. Is if a plow truck going by a mailbox, the windrow of snow that it's piling up, if that's what takes out the mailbox, that's not something that the city's going to replace the mailbox for. However, if there's an actual hit between the blade of the plow truck and the mailbox, then that's something that we would, again, folks that have that situation, certainly call into the transportation department and we can address that.
Okay. Okay. Anything else you want to tell our listeners?
Yeah, so I would say a couple of things. So one, here's my opportunity to plug a couple of things that we deal with pretty regularly.
Okay.
On the fall cleanup, I would ask that folks only put out leaves for the fall.
Yes.
A lot of times we get the sticks in there, and really, folks may think, it's not that big of a deal, but with the way we compost, we only compost the stuff we pick up in the fall, and we want that all to be leaves, and that helps us with getting that composting going and having that work for us. In the springtime is when we pick up everything, I say everything, but the sticks and branches and things like that. That we do not compost, right? So that'll go straight to Republic or Brewers, and I think they recycle it, but they probably have a grinding operation that they run with that. So again, in the fall, leaves only, please.
And does that, if there are larger branches in those piles, does that wreak havoc on the machines, on the trucks?
It can, but it's more what we do with it.
Okay.
That's where we really want to prohibit the woody material in those.
Gotcha.
Because of what we do with the product. And then the other thing in the wintertime, again, switching gears here, and hopefully we're a ways away from snow, but with the plow trucks in particular, if folks can just keep their distance from the plow trucks, those guys, if you ever been inside a plow truck, there is 1,000,001 levers and little doodads in there. So these folks, they're busy. They're paying attention to the roadway. So if you can just keep 100, several hundred feet back from them, they really appreciate that as they work to clear the streets and keep things safe for the traveling public there. So
give them space.
Give them space. Yeah, let them do their thing, and just know that they've got a lot going on in the cab.
Sure. So. Okay.
Yep.
Well, thank you, Brian. Thanks for stopping by and talking with us and telling us about what's coming up. Like you said, hopefully the snow is a little ways off, but I guess time will tell on that.
Right on.
Yeah. All right. Well,
thanks,
thank
Marianne.
you. Yeah, thanks. And until next time, this has been My Holland Update.